Hey guys, tonight we travel way back to a time when cities rose from clay. Harps hummed under thick desert skies, and tuning your instrument might just depend on the weather. Specifically, rain. Yeah, you're about to tumble into the sticky, dusty streets of ancient Sumer, where musicians didn't have digital tuners or fancy pitch apps. Nope, just a harp, some strings made of animal guts, and if they were lucky, a storm brewing overhead. Picture it, you're barefoot, wandering through the baked alleys of your city with too many ziggurats and absolutely no chill. The air is thick, heavy with that strange metallic scent that always seems to hang before a storm. People move slowly. Linen robes cling to sweaty backs. Donkeys bray without enthusiasm. You duck into a side street just as the first drop of rain hisses against a sun-warmed cobble. Above you, clouds churn in a bruised sky. Somewhere close by, you hear it, a slow, deliberate plucking sound. Not a melody, not yet. More like someone testing each string, one by one. You follow the sound and step through a beaded curtain into a shaded courtyard, where an old man with deep lines carved across his face sits with a harp across his lap. The thing is beautiful. Polished wood darkened by age, bronze pegs glinting, and strings that hum with a strange, almost otherworldly tone. And right beside him, a flat slab of stone, propped at an angle, already slick with the growing drizzle. He closes his eyes, listens. A raindrop lands plinkin. The old man plucks a string in response, adjusting a peg by the tiniest hair's width. You're not entirely sure what's happening, but somehow it feels important. Sacred, even so, before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I always love seeing where this sleepy little caravan drifts off to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together the harpist mutters something, maybe a prayer, maybe just a complaint about the humidity, and wipes his brow. He plucks again, waits for the next drop. You sit on a low bench, soaked robe clinging to your knees, and try to make sense of it. The rain doesn't fall in rhythm, not exactly, but there's something musical in its randomness. Each drop on the stone echoes faintly off the mud brick, walls forming a percussive undertone to the soft tuning. You probably won't survive this era, to be honest. Between the heat stroke, the gut parasites, and the fact that bread is basically just fermented sand, your odds aren't great. But for now, you're just another sleepy figure lost in the haze of an ancient afternoon, watching a musician commune with the clouds. This is not casual music making. Here, a harpist is more than a performer. He's a bridge between the mundane and the divine. The gods, apparently, have opinions about tuning. Play a song slightly off pitch, and you might be accused of inviting bad harvests or offensive winds. And while we modern folks might cringe at auto-tuned pop songs, back then, a poorly tuned harp could literally get you booted from temple service or worse. Assigned to latrine duty for a week. Rain, though rain is neutral, pure, its rhythm isn't human, so in moments like this, musicians use it as a kind of cosmic metronome, a way to match earthly tones with whatever's happening up in the sky palace of Enki or Enlil, or whoever's on music duty today. The old man plucks a string, just as another drop hits the stone. The notes match sort of, not in pitch exactly, but in vibration. There's a shared pulse, a sympathetic buzz. He nods in satisfaction and moves to the next string. You shift slightly, trying not to yawn too loudly. It's mesmerizing in its slowness. There's no urgency here. Just rain, just strings. Just the patient ritual of sound meeting silence. Historians still argue whether this technique was truly common, or whether it's something only certain elite temple musicians practiced. There are records, barely legible lines on tablets, unearthed near temple ruins that suggest raindrop tuning might have been symbolic more than practical. But that doesn't seem to bother the harpist beside you, who's now tapping the stone with a reed, trying to coax more drops into play, and then just for a moment you hear it, a chord, a full, resonant blend of notes. The harpist smiles, not a wide grin, but a knowing smirk. You've probably just witnessed a finished tuning, but no one claps. That would be weird. Instead, there's silence, except for the soft hiss of drizzle and the creak of a wooden chair as the old man slowly stands and bows his head. Now that his instrument is aligned, maybe the gods will listen. You let yourself drift a little. The storm outside doesn't rage, it mumbles. Thunder is a distant cough. Somewhere beyond the courtyard, someone laughs, then quickly hushes themselves. A donkey sneezes. You stretch your legs. They're a little numb from sitting so long. The stone under your feet is warm despite the rain, and it gives off a faint, earthy scent like wet terracotta mixed with firewood and damp linen. You realize this moment, this tuning, is probably something no one will ever write down. No one will carve it into clay or sing it to their kids. But it's here, and it's real. And it might just be the quietest kind of magic you've ever experienced. You rest your head back against the wall. Somewhere close, the old harpist plucks one more note, not for performance, but for pleasure. You barely hear it. It fades into the sound of rain. The rain has settled into a soft, lazy rhythm, now more a drizzle than a downpour. You're still sitting in the courtyard, the scent of wet stone and something faintly sour, probably pickled turnips, lingering in the air. The old harpist leans forward again, his eyes half closed as he reaches for the string that had been acting a little rebellious earlier. You watch as he turns a small bronze peg, not hurriedly, but with the kind of deliberate care usually reserved for threading a needle in candlelight. And then he listens not to the string, but to the sound of a raindrop landing on the stone slab again. Plink, he plunk. He adjusts. It's almost like he's having a conversation with the rain itself. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would anyone use raindrops to tune an instrument? Seems wildly impractical, doesn't it? Especially considering how often Sumer went without rain. But here's the twist. It wasn't about pitch precision in the way we think of it. This wasn't a lab coat 10 tuning fork situation. It was about vibration, resonance. The feeling that a sound was aligned with nature. You see, raindrops falling onto stone create an incredibly consistent type of vibration. The splatter is random, but the sound it makes is surprisingly stable, especially when it's falling in steady rhythm. Musicians noticed this. Or maybe they didn't notice it at first, and just liked the way it sounded. Either way, it became a tool, a reference point, a kind of sonic anchor. The harpist tilts the stone slightly, adjusting the angle to catch a more consistent drip from the edge of the awning. He uses his fingers to feel the vibrations, too, sometimes placing his palm flat against the whetstone while simultaneously touching a string. He's not measuring notes so much as aligning frequencies. Think of it like ancient autotune, but without the robot vocals or Grammy nominations. Quirky fact of the night. Some musical texts from Mesopotamia actually refer to the tiers of the sky as being blessed in pitch. No one knows if this was poetic exaggeration or literal tuning advice, but hey, we've all heard weirder song lyrics. Historians still argue whether the phrase meant actual raindrops or metaphorical rain as a sign of divine harmony. Either way, the image of an old man tuning his harp with droplets from heaven, chef's kiss. You shuffle closer for a better look. The strings on the harp glisten slightly in the dim courtyard light. They're made from gut, probably sheep or goat, stretched and dried and knotted with alarming precision. Gut strings are notoriously temperamental. Humidity affects them. Heat affects them. The mood of the musician. Yeah, probably that too, so. Raindrops help even that out. Not by drying anything, but by providing a sound so natural and unchanging that it helps reset your ears. It's a bit like staring at a blank wall to recalibrate your eyes after too many colors. Or when you open your freezer just to cool your brain after someone says something deeply dumb, and you're not alone in this courtyard. A younger harpist has joined the old man, probably a son, or an apprentice, or just someone who drew the short straw at temple this morning. He carries a smaller harp, though clearly fashioned in the same style. He plucks a few strings, scowls, and glances up at the clouds. Then he does something unexpected. He splashes a bit of rainwater from a clay bowl onto the stone intentionally, as if to get a better sound. Not exactly cheating, but definitely a shortcut. The old man doesn't scold him. He just raises an eyebrow like, really? That's your vibe today? You shift your gaze toward the gutter overhead, where the rain is now falling in slightly faster drips. The resonance changes subtly, less bell-like, more thuddy. The older harpist moves with it. He retunes one of the middle strings again, and this time, when he strums, the note vibrates so cleanly that even your slightly damp eardrums feel it. There's no audience for this, by the way. No stage, no applause. Just two people and their instruments chasing a feeling. The act of tuning here is just as meaningful as the music itself. It's a meditation, a process. The kind of thing you could imagine doing for hours without playing a single song. Which, to be fair, kind of sounds like your high school jazz band. There's also something weirdly personal about the process. No two harpists seem to tune exactly the same way. Some might rely on ear alone. Others, like these two, trust the water and the stone. There were even rumors in later Akkadian scrolls about musicians who tuned to the rhythm of bird calls, or the vibration of bees trapped in ceramic pots. We're not saying that's effective, just that humans have always been creatively chaotic. The rain starts to slow, and the younger harpist sighs. He taps the stone, but the droplets are fewer now. So he picks up the clay bowl again, and pours the remaining water slowly along the top ridge, mimicking the natural drip. The resulting sound is rougher, more irregular. You catch the old harpist watching, silently judging, but not stopping him, because here's the truth. Tuning with raindrops isn't about perfection. It's about ceremony. About connecting with something outside yourself, using what little nature gives you in this flat, baked land. Sometimes it's not even about music. It's about trying to listen more than speak, as the drizzle fades completely. The two harpists exchange a few quiet words in Sumerian. You don't catch the meaning. Your language skills aren't exactly 2000 BCE level, but the tone is warm. They're satisfied, the harps are ready. Tomorrow, perhaps, there will be a festival, or a prayer offering, or maybe just a moment in the temple courtyard where someone will play a single song, perfectly in tune with the memory of tonight's rain. You stretch, trying not to creak like the old wooden bench. Your hands are pruny from resting on damp stone, and your sandals squish a bit when you stand, but it's worth it. You've just seen music tuned by the sky itself. Not bad for a civilization that didn't even have doorknobs. The rain is gone, leaving behind that faint, metallic aftertaste in the air like iron and ash and something sweetly rotten. You trail the two harpists through the narrow passageway leading out of the courtyard. One carries the older harp, now carefully wrapped in oiled cloth, slung over his back with the reverence you'd expect for a sleeping god. The other balances the smaller one on his shoulder, occasionally checking a peg with an almost compulsive twitch. You pass under an archway, and there it is, a dusty workshop tucked behind the temple complex, filled with the quiet hum of wood shavings and dried glue. Welcome to the harp's birthplace. And you, dear traveler, are about to get an intimate peek at the guts and bones of one of the oldest musical instruments ever created. Literally, a half-built harp lies on a bench, its frame freshly carved from local date palm wood, the grain still rough beneath half-hearted sanding. Another one, leaning against the wall, is wrapped in linen to keep the desert heat from cracking it. The room smells like sweat, old cedar, and possibly a goat who wandered in and hasn't found his way back out. You step around a pile of gut strings, some coiled neatly, some definitely not tanned, realize just how much guesswork is baked into this process. Harp construction in Sumer is part engineering, part voodoo. There are no blueprints, just memory, apprenticeship, and the occasional "oh no, not that peg again" whispered under breath. The frame usually follows a basic triangular design, though sometimes the arms curve like a question mark. It depends on the city, the temple, the mood of the carpenter, and how much beer was involved in last night's festival. You run a finger along the frame of a completed harp. It's surprisingly smooth. The strings, though, are where things get delightfully uncomfortable. They're made from gut, usually sheep, but occasionally cow or even human, don't ask. The gut is stripped, soaked, scraped, stretched, dried, twisted, and finally oiled. It takes days, and the smell is ... memorable. Let's just say, if you had a nickel for every fly in this room, you could fund your own ziggurat. The pegs are hand-carved, often bronze or copper alloy, sometimes just polished bone. They're wedged into the wood so tightly that adjusting them is a physical workout. You watch as one of the apprentices uses a wooden mallet to tap a peg into place, then sighs when the wood cracks slightly. Back to square one again. Quirky historical tidbit. Some Sumerian harp makers believed that using wood from a tree that had been struck by lightning gave the instrument divine resonance. Whether that's ancient acoustics or just a really dramatic marketing strategy, historians still argue. There are even cuneiform tablets with short hymns dedicated specifically to trees felled during storms, as if the wood carried celestial leftovers. You sit on a stool wobbly, of course, and watch the older harpist tweak a nearly finished instrument. He tugs on the strings one by one, testing tension by ear. No tuning forks, no pitch pipes, just years of experience and the faint echo of a remembered melody from who knows how many rituals ago. Sometimes he hums as he works, matching tone to string, correcting gently with a flick of the peg. It's almost frustratingly imprecise. You keep expecting someone to pull out a measuring tool, maybe a marked rod or even a bit of string. But nope, this isn't math. This is feel. You begin to see why raindrops became part of the ritual, because when everything else is so wildly unpredictable, using the rhythm of nature offers a kind of trust you can't get from pure craftsmanship. There's also a subtle artistry in how the harp is balanced. The frame has to be strong enough to hold taut strings, but light enough to carry across a temple floor. Some are decorated tiny carvings of ibexes or winged bulls, faint traces of paint clinging to their eyes. Others are plain, utilitarian. Not all harps are created for performance. Some are made for funerals, others for processions, others still for quiet temple meditations where the music isn't meant to entertain but to realign the energy of the space. You run your thumb along one of the gut strings. It's smooth but sticky, like it's still remembering the animal it came from. Harsh reminder, every beautiful sound you'll hear from this harp started with something dying. Romantic, huh? There's a part of the workshop off to the side where older instruments sit on shelves, cracked or broken. Some are used for parts, others are kept for sentimental reasons or maybe superstition. One harp, almost completely blackened with age, is missing 3 strings but still holds its shape. Someone has tucked a clay flower into the tuning head like a tiny offering. You wonder if that harp ever played a song in the rain. Nearby, a young boy watches everything with wide eyes. His job today seems to be passing tools and avoiding blame. But every so often, he sneaks a touch, running his finger along the frame, plucking a muted string when no one's watching. He doesn't speak, but the look in his eyes says it all. He's already fallen in love with the idea of sound shaped by wood and wind and weather. You lean back, taking in the organized chaos. It's dusty, it's loud, it smells like ancient glue and roasted onions. But every single harp in this space, half built, well used, freshly strungs a piece of someone's ritual, someone's moment of silence or celebration or grief. So, the next time someone brags about their hand-carved guitar or artisan ukulele, just remember, 4,000 years ago, a barefoot Sumerian with a goat-hide tool belt and a water-dripping rock was crafting music under a leaking roof, and his harp might have been in better tune than yours. You step out of the workshop, wiping the fine layer of sawdust from your palms, and head toward the temple where music finally meets its purpose. The sun has returned, reluctantly, filtering through the haze with that warm, golden light that makes mud brick glow like polished amber. The scent of damp earth bakes off the ground as the heat creeps back in. You follow the harpists along the sunken walkway toward the ziggurat, which towers like a step pyramid, trying to impress the gods by sheer audacity. They're heading to a rehearsal, though nobody calls it that. It's more like a spiritual warm-up. The harps have been tuned using last night's raindrops, their pegs adjusted, strings tightened, frames polished. Now comes the real test. playing in the echoing belly of the temple, where every mistake sounds 10 times louder, and every note hangs in the air like incense. The temple itself is quiet in that eerie, expectant way. Not silence, no, there's always sound. You hear the rustle of linen robes, the soft slap of bare feet on cool tiles, the crackle of oil lamps struggling to stay lit in the thick morning air. A priestess moves past you with a bowl of dates and barley, nodding without smiling. This is a sacred space, but also a lived-in one. You can practically smell last week's offering still clinging to the stone floor. Inside the temple chamber, there's a shallow platform where the musicians sit. It's not a stage. Stages are for performers. This is an altar with strings. They set the harps down gently, almost reverently. No one speaks yet. Not because they're shy, but because tuning in the temple isn't just a continuation of. The workshop hits the moment the music has to breathe in the divine air and find its voice. The acoustics are, frankly, ridiculous. Sumerians weren't just slapping bricks together and hoping for the best. They engineered their sacred spaces with a clear awareness of how sound moved. High ceilings, angled corridors, porous walls that didn't just hold up a roof but also bounced sound around in surprising ways. There's a whispering quality to everything. A plucked note becomes a wandering spirit, refusing to die quickly. Even a footstep sounds like an idea waiting to be spoken. One harpist plucks a single string. It vibrates, shimmers, then fades, leaving a kind of ghost note hanging in your ear. The other follows with a harmony, slightly off at first. They frown, adjust a peg, and try again. This process repeats for a while. Notes are tested against the shape of the room itself. The same strings that matched the raindrops last night now must match the echo of the temple. And here's where things get delightfully strange. There's a clay bowl filled with sand near the wall. Why? Because some musicians claimed that watching the vibrations of a harp string could be amplified by placing it near certain materials. If the sand jumped in response to a note, it meant the string was correctly aligned with the room's energy. Is that science? Is it superstition? Historians still argue whether that sand trick was legit, or just a clever distraction for bored apprentices. Regardless, it works. Sort of a high string is plucked, and the sand flutters ever so slightly. Everyone in the room seems pleased. One priest nods, jotting something onto a wax tablet with the confidence of someone who has no idea what they're writing, but knows it looks important. Then comes the warm-up chant. Not sung, but intoned. A low, vibrating hum that starts in the chest and rolls forward like thunder in slow motion. The musicians play along, matching their strings to the rise and fall of the voices. No one is really aiming for melody. They're aiming for connection. Like matching the sound of your own breath to a friend's when you're walking in step without realizing. And while this sounds esoteric now, it was normal then. This wasn't a special event, it was daily ritual. Music in the temple wasn't a performance. It was maintenance. Just like sweeping the floor or trimming the sacred garden, you had to tune the space using sound. Think of it as vibrational housekeeping. Instead of a mop, you used a harp. There's an older tablet in one corner, cracked and scorched around the edges. You squint at the Cuneiform. It speaks of a ceremony during a solar eclipse, where 12 harps were played simultaneously to drown out the silence of the sky. It's dramatic, sure, but oddly poetic. And it suggests the belief that certain sounds could rebalance cosmic imbalance. The kind of thinking that leads to statements like, "We'll just play louder until the sun feels welcome again." It's at this moment that someone drops a tuning peg. It hits the stone with a clink so sharp that even the priest frowns. The younger harpist scrambles to pick it up, muttering something that probably translates to, "Sorry, sorry, sorry. I was holding it gently, I swear." But no one scolds him. Instead, the older harpist picks up his instrument and begins playing. A slow, deliberate scale. The notes rise and fall, not in a perfect pattern, but more like a question being asked over and over. Each note bounces off the walls differently, sometimes lingering, sometimes snapping short. He's testing the space again, relearning how. The room breathes. You can tell he's not just tuning the harp. He's tuning himself to the temple. And here's the big debate. The one scholars still can't wrap their heads around. Was this all symbolic? Or did they really believe music had a tangible effect on the world around them? Was harp tuning spiritual science, or just beautiful ritual? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the line between the two was never drawn in the first place. In Sumer, the spiritual and the practical were often the same thing, just experienced through different senses. Eventually, the tuning is done. The harps sit still, as if holding their breath. The musicians rest their hands on their knees. A bell rings from somewhere deeper in the temple, calling priests, scribes, and dreamers to prayer. Music will follow soon, but for now, there's only quiet. Not empty, not hollow, just full of waiting. You lean against a column, heart still echoing, with the last few notes, and wonder if your ears have changed. If the temple's tuning process has somehow fine-tuned you in return. You don't leave the temple, you drift out. Half floating, half walking, your feet still humming with the echoes of harp strings and low chant-like vibrations. Outside, the sunlight is harsher now, angles sharper, shadows deeper. The ziggurat looms behind you like a pyramid caught mid-sentence, and even though it's massive, it feels quieter than the music you just left behind. You follow the musicians, not the older ones this time, but the younger crowd. Apprentices and curious boys trailing their mentors, carrying spare pegs, extra strings, and that unforgettable air of, "I'm totally not pretending I know what I'm doing." They don't go far. Just to a shady little corner of the courtyard, where the walls have been marked with soot and chalk. Notations and drawings you can't quite decipher. This is the listening corner. It's not an official name. No one carved a tablet declaring it so. But here's where the experimentation happens. Here's where the harpists stretch their fingers beyond temple rules and play, just to hear what might happen. Some even close their eyes. Others hum along. And the air shifts not with reverence, but curiosity. You sit cross-legged on a worn mat that's probably seen too many rainy nights. One of the younger harpists plucks a string and winces. Too flat, he tightens the peg with a practiced jerk. Another tries a pattern, 3 notes descending like falling pebbles, then a jump up, sharp and playful. They're not rehearsing, they're paceful there. Searching. And what they're searching for is both incredibly human and deeply weird. They're trying to replicate the rhythms of nature, not just the sound of the rain, but the pattern. The irregular but strangely comforting way raindrops hit mud, stone, palm leaves, and cloth. Some call it tuning by divine mimicry, trying to echo the voice of the gods by copying their messiest, most unstructured lullaby. Here's your historical anchor. Sumerians believed the gods communicated through irregular rhythms, rainfall, animal calls. So musicians, especially temple harpists, didn't always aim for mathematical precision. They wanted resonance that felt accidentally perfect. That's where raindrop tuning came in. Musicians would literally sit out in the rain with their harps protected just enough to avoid disaster and listen. When a drop hit a string and produced a sound, that note was considered blessed. They'd then adjust the rest of the strings to align with it. Yes, this was a thing. And no, modern music theory doesn't quite know what to do with it. Some historians roll their eyes and say it's apocryphal temple myth. Others argue it makes total sense in a world where meteorology was divine and chaos was a kind of harmony. You pick your camp. But you have to admit it's weirdly beautiful. Now, here in the listening corner, they're recreating that sensation. One apprentice has a bowl filled with water and drips liquid onto stretched animal hide, trying to mimic the sound of rainfall. Another plucks his harp in time with it. Slowly, a rhythm emerges, not metronomic but pulsing, unsteady, intimate. You feel your shoulders drop a little, your jaw unclenches. A fringe theory floats among the harpists, one not found in official texts, but whispered between students during late nights. They say that if you can match your harp to the exact rhythm of a real Sumerian rainstorm, you unlock a song so pure it can heal. Not metaphorically, literally. Fevers break, wounds close, grief lifts. No one's proven it, of course, but no one's laughing either. After all, if you've ever fallen asleep to real rain, you already know what it feels like to be healed by rhythm. You notice one of the harpists plucking two strings simultaneously, a sharp, dissonant interval. He frowns. That wasn't it. He tries again, fingers drifting into a new configuration. This time, the notes bloom together, neither major nor minor. Not quite happy, not quite sad, just true. He grins. A quiet one, like someone who just guessed the punchline to a joke no one told. There's laughter now. One harpist hits a wrong note, so loud and ridiculous that even the grumpy one chuckles. The group falls into a kind of jam sessions. The notes chase each other, mimic rain again, then drift into something older, something you feel in your ribs. One harpist starts tapping the wooden frame of his instrument in rhythm, adding a soft percussion. Another hums a scale. Above the strings, his voice weaving through the notes like smoke through sunbeams. You catch yourself swaying slightly. And you're not alone. Everyone in the corner is wrapped in the rhythm. And yet, it's barely even music by modern standards. There's no melody you could hum, no beat you could clap to. But there's unity. And in that unity, a sense of rightness. And this is where you realize, the process of tuning in Sumer wasn't about hitting a pitch. It was about entering a space where sound made sense, where your instrument, your body, and the world around you all agreed on one quiet truth. This is how we breathe. Quirky detail of the day. Some musicians tied bells to their ankles and walked slowly through temple courtyards, letting their footsteps echo in the rain to discover sacred pacing. Sounds ridiculous. But imagine walking through mud, ankle, bells ringing, harp on your back, rain misting your shoulders, and Each step becomes part of a rhythm larger than you. Suddenly not so silly, is it? Evening is tiptoeing in now, painting the edges of the courtyard with soft blue. One of the apprentices packs up his harp with the kind of reluctance you'd use if someone asked you to stop dreaming mid-dream. Another one keeps playing slow now, sleepy, not trying anymore, just letting the notes fall like tired raindrops. Someone yawns. Someone else lies back on the stone floor. The notes get fewer farther between, but you can still feel the rhythm, tucked between your ribs. A final fun fact before you drift. The Sumerians had no word for music as we know it. The closest term translated roughly to sound that makes the heart ready. And in this little dusty corner of the world, with harps echoing rainfall and your body slowly melting into stillness, well, mission accomplished. The courtyard is nearly empty now. The harpists have dispersed, their soft laughter trailing off down stone corridors like incense smoke on a breeze. You linger, of course, because now you're curious, buzzing with it, even if your limbs are draped in that special post-music kind of exhaustion. The kind where every sound seems louder, every breeze a little cooler, and you wonder if your heartbeat has learned something new about time. So naturally, you follow the sound of footsteps and soft conversation toward the archives. Yes, the archives. Think of them like the ancient equivalent of your school library, minus the fluorescent lighting and broken laminators. These are cool, dark rooms stacked with clay tablets, scrolls, wooden cases, and shelves made of sun-hardened reed. The air smells of soot, pressed herbs, and that peculiar dusty tang of memory itself. And here's where things get even more interesting, because in the back corner, half hidden behind a drape of linen dyed with lapis powder, is a collection of harp diagrams, yes, actual tuning guides, or what's left of them, chipped, cracked, and sometimes written in such tangled cuneiform that even modern scholars still say things like ... maybe. It says pluck here, or don't lick the string. You crouch beside one tablet, fingers hovering above the engraved marks. It's a harp tuning sequence sort of. There's a column of symbols that looks suspiciously like measurements, another that reads like a weather log, and a third with musical intervals recorded in phrases like fifth of the ox and string of the moon. Your brain does a little cartwheel. Either the Sumerians used livestock to define musical scales, or they really liked poetic metaphors. Historians still argue whether those phrases were literal tonal references or mythological code words used only in sacred rituals. Either way, this stuff is gold. One damaged tablet offers a curious instruction: wet the string from the left, not the right. The god listens first from the west. You blink. That's not a tuning rule, exactly. That's spiritual audio engineering. The idea that the direction of the water mattered, that gods had favorite ears, bonkers and oddly specific. But it hints at something bigger, something more layered, that maybe harp tuning wasn't just a matter of physics, but part of a coded dialogue between mortal and divine. You weren't just preparing an instrument, you were summoning permission to use it. Further down the shelves, you spot another cracked tablet with what looks like tiny pictographs next to each string. Raindrops, stars, a spiral that might be wind, a human ear, carved large, almost cartoonish. It's like an instruction to listen before you touch anything. You like that? A reminder that music starts long before the first note. And here's where a fringe belief among modern scholars sneaks in. Some argue that Sumerian harpists created early ambient maps of soundscapes picturing how a song should feel before composing it. Instead of writing notes on a scale, they drew the atmosphere of the song, like ancient graphic scores. Want a melody that feels like dawn on whetstone? There's a symbol for that. A piece that mimics the chaos of a summer storm. Use the zigzag that looks like a startled goat. It sounds made up, until you realize modern composers do similar things. Ever heard of graphic notation? Same idea, just with less goat. You keep leafing through these stone pages more slowly now. The deeper into the archive you go, the more speculative the texts become. One tablet describes a harp with 14 strings, 2 of them tuned deliberately off to create divine irritation, like on purpose. Because apparently, the gods didn't trust music that was too pleasant. It was considered suspicious. Harmony was lovely, but dissonance meant honesty, realness, and yes. That's absolutely a lesson you could take to heart before your next ukulele open mic. Another favorite of yours. A tiny fragment of a children's harp training guide. It's charming in the way only something 3,000 years old can be. It says, "Do not cry if the string breaks. Do not eat the string. If your brother steals your peg, tell the priest, not the snake." Sage advice, really, and it confirms what you've suspected. Harp training started early. Kids were taught rhythm before they were taught farming. Not because music made them money, but because it made them useful. In temples, in rituals, in the slow and careful process of convincing the world not to fall apart. You rub your eyes. It's gotten darker while you read. A flickering oil lamp has been set beside you, at some point maybe by a passing scribe. You didn't even notice. You've gone full scholar mode now. You're in too deep, but here's the strange thing. For all the diagrams, poetic tuning tables, and metaphors about oxen and rain gods, there's still no unified system. No one-size-fits-all chart. Every tablet seems to contradict another. Some advocate 5 tones, others suggest 7. A few reference tuning according to planetary movement. One even advises aligning your harp's tuning to the behavior of ants during rainfall. And yes, that's either nonsense or an ancient form of environmental sound mapping. Historians still argue whether it was just symbolic or if musicians genuinely watched ants to decide if their music was emotionally accurate. You chuckle softly. Then sigh. It's beautiful. Really, the idea that music could be so responsive, so tied to weather, mood, and movement, that tuning a harp wasn't about perfect sound, but about timing, about catching the right moment in the world's rhythm, and weaving your own tiny melody into it. You rise from the mat, your knees creaking a bit. The night is full now, pressed against the window slits. Somewhere in the courtyard, a single harp string is plucked. Just once, a perfect, lonely note. Then, silence. You leave the archives quietly, heart heavy and head spinning. You're not sure what time it is. Time feels ... optional, instead. You carry the feeling of those ancient diagrams with youth, a memory of clay tablets whispering about sound and storm, string and sky. And as you walk through the dark, one thing is certain. Whatever else the Sumerians got wrong, they definitely understood that tuning was never just about the harp. It was about you. The walk back through the temple corridors feels different this time. Slower, softer. Maybe it's the lamplight, flickering shadows along mud brick walls. Maybe it's the memory of that single harp note still humming in your bones. Or maybe you've started to realize that nothing in Sumeria was ever just what it seemed. Harps weren't just instruments. Rain wasn't just water. And sound. Well, sound was practically a religion. Your sandals crunch on scattered sand as you round a corner and find yourself in yet another courtyard, this one enclosed, almost secretive. Not many people here. Just two figures hunched over what looks like a workbench, and a few low shelves stacked with cords, bronze pegs, and dried gut strings that look disturbingly like pasta. You found the harp repair station, or as one particularly sarcastic tablet once called it, the room where strings go to die. Here, tuning becomes something messier, something physical. It's not about rain rhythms or symbolic diagrams. It's about real strings stretching, snapping, fraying under fingers. One of the repairers curses softly in Sumerian as a string breaks mid-knot. Another one laughs, hands him a new bundle. You get closer. They don't stop you. One string is soaking in a bowl of scented oil, some kind of resin and crushed juniper. Blend that smells like summer dirt and forgotten herbs. This is your historical fact of the night. Sumerian harpists regularly treated strings with oils to keep them supple and responsive to humidity. They weren't just tying gut and hoping for the best. There was chemistry involved, and more than a little superstition. For instance, a popular fringe practice involved whispering blessings directly into the string before attaching it to the frame. Not loud, just breathy enough that the spirit of the instrument felt your intent. Is it science? Definitely not. But is it wholesome? 100%. You try it silently. The string doesn't respond, but you do feel slightly cooler. Now, here's where things get sticky literally. The glue used to anchor harp strings often came from boiled animal hide and tree resin. The process was slow, messy, and smelled like someone cooked socks in a thunderstorm. But it worked. A harp had to be durable enough to survive travel, humidity, and ritual burning. Yes, that was a thing. Some instruments were made to be temporarily played for a single ceremony, then sacrificed to the gods. You stare at a half-assembled harp leaning against the bench. It's small, child-sized, made from date palm wood, strung with 7 carefully spaced holes drilled along its crossbar. The craftsman picks it up and checks the tension, pressing his thumb along the top like a baker testing dough. Then he gestures for you to come closer. And now you're tuning. He hands you a bronze tuning key, T-shaped tool used to twist the string pegs. You grasp the rough wooden neck of the harp, place the key on a peg, and begin to turn. The string groans, tightens, vibrates slightly. You pluck. The note wavers, unsure of itself. You try again, a little looser. The pitch stabilizes. It's not perfect. It doesn't need to be. And this is when it hits you. Tuning in. Sumer wasn't about fixed frequencies or concert pitch. It was about mood. Tone had to match not just the room, but the purpose. A funeral harp might be tuned lower, darker, resonating with the depth of grief. A harvest festival harp. Brighter, higher, meant to slice through the air like sunlight through barley. Historians still argue whether these tunings followed fixed scales or adjusted intuitively by performer and event. And that's the magic here. There was no one Sumerian tuning system. There were many. Maybe even one for every musician. Tuning was personal, subjective. An ongoing conversation between hand, string, and the day's emotional weather forecast. Back at the bench, one craftsman finishes, adjusting a harp and places it gently on a reed mat. He touches his forehead to the frame, mutters a quiet prayer, and then lets it rest. Not every instrument makes it out of this room. Some are retired here, cracked beyond repair, or simply too old. But they're never discarded, even broken. Harps are treated with reverence. And here's your quirky detail. Some broken harps were believed to contain frozen songs, notes so potent they broke the frame itself. It's completely unproven, obviously. But some repairers would still pause before dismantling a shattered harp, listening for a final ghost note hiding in the wood. Suddenly, a gust of wind kicks up outside, brushing the reed curtain across the doorway. A change in pressure. Rain is coming again. And just like that, everyone in the room perks up. Tools are set down, strings secured. You're ushered out, not rudely, but with urgency. They have to prepare, because you can't tune in the rain, but you can tune for it. Back in the main courtyard, people are already gathering. It's not an official ritual, but it feels important. A communal checking in with the sky. One by one, harpists bring out their instruments not to play, but to listen. To feel how the air changes the sound. The temperature drops slightly. A drop hits your nose. Then another. A scattered tapping on stone and clay and skin. You crouch. Lay your hand gently on a nearby harp. The wood is vibrating, just a whisper, but it's there. A resonance waiting to be shaped. No one speaks. The courtyard fills with silence between drops, with fingers twitching on pegs, adjusting, waiting. The tuning begins not in action, but in attention. You're tuning to the storm itself. A harpist nearby mutters, "East string needs blessing." You nod, pretending you know what that means. Here's a debate for the scholars. Some suggest this kind of moment represents one of the earliest examples of environmental music. Tuning, a pre-scientific way of adapting musical instruments to atmospheric conditions. Others say it's nonsense. Just mythology. You can guess which side you're leaning toward right now. The first small roll of thunder hums through the sky, low and warm. And without a word, the harpists begin again, plucking, adjusting, not performing, just tuning. But it sounds like a symphony. Not the kind that ends with applause. The kind that reminds you that the world, at least for a moment, is in tune with itself. You stay. You listen. The rain begins in earnest, and every drop feels like a note. You were meant to hear. You don't even realize how long you've been sitting in the rain. The storm has settled into that perfect rhythm now, not pouring, not rushing, just ... whispering. Soft drops over stone, over reed, over skin, and over strings. You've stayed near the edge of the courtyard, half sheltered beneath a woven canopy. The harpists haven't moved much either. Some have wrapped their instruments in linen to protect them from the damp. Others are still out. They're gently plucking as the rain plays its own counterpoint. No one's in a hurry. Why would they be? Here, tuning isn't just about precision, it's about presence. And tonight, the rain is part of the orchestra. There's a boy to your left, maybe. 12 or 13, cradling a beginner's harp, like it's a sleeping cat. He's not playing, just tapping the wood in time with the falling drops. Every now and then, he hums a pitch, checks the string, nods like a tiny conductor. It's one of the sweeter things you've seen all night. You lean closer, he catches your eye, grins, and points upward. Rain's changing, he says. You can hear it. You pause. He's not wrong. The tempo has shifted faster now. On the stones. Softer on the reeds. The temperature has dipped a bit, and the strings, those made from guitar, reacting. Some tighten in the cool, others stretch with the moisture in the air. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Gut strings, particularly those made from sheep or goat intestines, were highly sensitive to humidity. Harpists in Sumer would often retune their instruments several times during a single performance if the weather turned. And on nights like this, it turned constantly. You pull the linen tighter around your shoulders and watch as a master harpist steps into the center of the courtyard. Her robe is heavy with water, but she doesn't seem to notice. She kneels beside a low bronze brazier, warming her hands, and then begins to play not a melody, but tones. Single, slow notes, each one allowed to bloom into silence. Around her, the others adjust, like birds tuning to the sunrise. This is what's known today, at least as drone tuning. Not in the techie sci-fi sense, but in the original musical. 1. A sustained bass note used to tune and layer other pitches. It's one of the oldest techniques in the book. Literally, ancient drone tones helped harpists anchor their intervals, essentially, when everything else was shifting with the wind and the rain. But here's where it gets interesting. Instead of using a fixed pitch, Sumerian harpists often let the environment choose the bass tone. That's your fringe tidbit. A theory, among some scholars, suggests harpists didn't set the drone themselves. They found it in the world around them. In thunder, in wind, in rain. They tuned to nature's most persistent hum. Right now. That hum is the low drip of rainwater from the roof beams. A steady, hollow sound, almost like a distant drum. You focus. One of the harpists plucks a matching note. It fits. Others follow. A slow cascade of harmonies, each one barely louder than the rain itself. No lyrics, no form, just alignment. And in the middle of it all, a question begins to hum inside you. What if this is the music? Not the songs they played at festivals, not the hymns written on tablets, but the invisible stuff. The quiet, the waiting, the tuning. Historians still argue whether these tuning sessions were considered part of the performance or merely a prelude. Some claim the act of preparing the harp, in rhythm with the rain, was itself a sacred offering. Others say it was just warm-up. Necessary, but not meaningful. You glance around, no one here looks bored. No one's rushing, they're inside something together. A shared soundscape with no audience but each other and the weather. A nearby priest lights another oil lamp. Its flame dancing in the breeze. The scent of burning cedar curls through the air, mingling with petrichor and something faintly sweet, rosemary, or crushed fig leaf. A sensory orchestra, if there ever was one. And this brings us to a curious little footnote. Some harpists were known to carry scent packets during rainy ceremonies, bundles of herbs tucked into their robes, meant to enhance the emotional tone of their music. Lavender for calming intervals, mint for sharper, brighter tones, Some even claimed certain smells helped tune their minds to specific frequencies. Whether this was practical or just ancient aromatherapy is, of course, still debated, but you don't care. You inhale deeply. Whatever this scent is, it pairs perfectly with harp and drizzle. The boy next to you hums again. This time, you recognize it, a fourth above the drone note. A sweet, resolved interval. He plucks, adjusts, smiles. You can't help but smile too. It's strange how peaceful all of this feels. Like you're not in the middle of an ancient civilization at all. More like you're in the eye of something, some vast and swirling storm of time, sound, and meaning. And the harpists? They're not fighting it. They're not forcing control. They're just tuning themselves to it. And that's the point, isn't it? The Sumerians didn't separate themselves from the world around them. They didn't draw lines between music and weather, between tuning and worship, between performance and presence. They blended it all. Let the rain decide the rhythm, let the sky set the tone. You look down at your hands. One of your fingers is stained faintly from a string you hadn't noticed. A little reminder. You've been part of this, even just for a moment, and while no one says a word, you all begin to gather your things. Not because the ceremony is over, because the tuning is done. The rain will continue, but now the harps are ready for whatever comes next. You stand, stretch. Your muscles are stiff, but your chest feels lighter as you follow the slow procession back into the temples. Inner hallways, you catch one final glimpse of the courtyard. Empty, now. Just puddles and strings, still humming from the touch of rain. And a sense deep in your chest that you've just witnessed something real. Something that doesn't need explanation. Only memory. By now, you walk differently, slower, with that post-massage kind of float. Your sandals don't slap so much. Anymore, they whisper. The temple corridors seem quieter too, like they've noticed your shift in frequency. You're not just a tourist anymore. You're mildly initiated. Don't get cocky. Still don't know how to read cuneiform or call up a rainstorm, but you did tune a harp in a thunder ritual. And honestly, that earns you a few honorary Sumerian points. You pass a line of oil lamps guttering low, their flames bouncing gold off the walls. Somewhere behind a mud brick column, a reed flute trills lazily, nothing formal, just someone improvising in the dark. You pause to listen, and now you're hearing it everywhere. The echo of tuning, in the dripping gutters, the soft mutter of sandals, the faint buzzing of tension strings resting between performances. Tonight's next stop is tucked deep in the ziggurat's shadow, through a side passage guarded by nothing more than a carved fish on a lintel. This place doesn't house rituals or repairs, it's where the records sleep. You push aside a heavy reed mat and step into a long, low room lit by a single oil bowl. The air smells like dried papyrus and old beeswax. Tablets are stacked everywhere, rows of clay slates etched with ancient characters, little dents and dashes that probably reveal all the secrets of the universe. Or a tax audit. It's hard to say. You're here for the musical records, and yes, they exist. Here's your mainstream, historical fact. Among the many things Sumerians etched into clay grocery lists, star charts, oddly specific curse spells, they also left behind musical notations. Primitive ones, yes, but real. Most were syllabic instructions rather than symbols like modern sheet music. You wouldn't find a treble clef anywhere, but you would see arrangements for ceremonies, hymn fragments, and even instructions on harp string order. One particularly famous tablet, found in Nippur, described string groupings in descending order, likely to guide the player through specific tonal patterns. Not chords, those came much later, but sequences. The flow of sound. But here's your quirky tidbit. Scholars have found references to songs that only the stars understand. That's not poetic exaggeration, it's a literal phrase inscribed on a temple tablet. No one's cracked the full meaning, but it may refer to musical pieces meant for divination, rituals tuned, not for humans, but for celestial beings. Interstellar elevator music, if you will. You crouch beside a low shelf and pick up one of the smoother tablets. The symbols are clearer here, triangular strokes in neat, rhythmic rows. A young scribe, maybe, run your fingers across the grooves, half hoping they'll vibrate under your touch. The room's only other occupant, a man older than dust and twice as creaky, notices your interest. He doesn't speak, just motions for you to follow. You do, obviously, because when a Sumerian librarian waves you over without making a sound, you obey. He leads you to a stone slab, tucked in the baka table, maybe, or an altar. Atop it, a narrow box rests, sealed with a thin layer of hardened pitch. The old man breaks it open with practiced ease and reveals not a harp, not even a full instrument, just strings. 7 of them, each one coiled neatly, preserved like sacred fossils. Dull in color now, grayish gold, but unmistakably musical. This, he indicates, was a harp that once belonged to a temple musician named Irama. According to the records, she composed a rain-matching scale using animal cries as tonal guides, meaning she listened to frogs, owls, even desert foxes and translated their voices into string pitches. That's your historical mystery tonight. Historians still argue whether this animal tune note system was a legitimate tuning method or just early Sumerian whimsy. But the theory has legs. There are enough textual references to cry scales and beast songs to suggest it wasn't a one-off. You lean closer to the strings. They're stiff now, brittle, but you swear you can feel the notes hidden inside them. You imagine Enirama crouched by a pond, mimicking a toad's rasp on her harp, then adjusting the tension until the tone matched the croak. It's either genius or madness, or both. And suddenly you realize something. Every harpist you've seen today, every tuner, every string soaker, every rain listener, they weren't just playing music. They were trying to capture something. A moment, a mood, a living pitch, which brings you to another delightful wrinkle. The Sumerians believed certain tunings could open metaphysical doors, not metaphorical ones, actual ones. Think of it as frequency-based locksmithing. Some priest musicians insisted that the right interval, played on a storm-blessed harp, could reveal divine truths or even summon gods. Is it provable? No. Is it compelling bedtime content? Absolutely. The old librarian scribbles something on a piece of waxed bark, then hands it to you. A string diagram. Notation symbols for a scale tuned to the tears of the moon. You pocket it like a secret recipe. Who knows? Maybe you'll try it on a rainy day outside. The rain's beginning to thin. The thunder is a memory now more felt than heard. You leave the archives slowly, reluctant to step away from the dusty magic of clay tablets and string relics. But the temple beckons again. There's another sound calling you now. Not rain, not tuning forks or harp strings. Drumming faint, but growing louder, you follow. And in the stillness between each beat, you realize something has shifted again. Not just the weather, the mood, the purpose. Tuning is over. The performance is about to begin. The sound is magnetic. You follow the beat like it's pulling a string through your sternum steady. Hypnotic, impossibly patient. Not a war drum, not a marching rhythm. No, this is a summoning, a kind of heartbeat for the gods. And at this hour, with the rain faded and the night air clinging to your skin like warm silk, it feels less like music and more like a gravitational field. You pass a few familiar faces, harpists you watched earlier, now wearing ceremonial cloaks. Instruments slung over their backs like sacred cargo. One of them catches your gaze, nods. You're part of it now. Whether you understand it or not. The central courtyard is glowing. Oil lamps line the perimeter, their flames shivering in synchrony. In the center, ringed by stone and shallow pools of collected rainwater, is a low dais. Not grand, not elevated, just slightly different enough to say, this is the space. And the harps are gathering. About a dozen musicians now, seated in a crescent, tuning complete. Their fingers move with casual grace, no showmanship, no ego, just readiness. The air buzzes, not from tension, but from focus. That warm, humming kind of silence that tells you something important is about to happen. Here's your historical anchor. Ceremonial performances in ancient Sumer weren't open mic nights. They were tightly orchestrated ritual events, often tied to lunar cycles, seasonal transitions, or specific divine petitions. And tonight, based on the crescent moon overhead and the harpist's specific positioning, you're likely witnessing a night-pouring Ceremonian offering of sound, scent, and water to the sky gods. You sit along the outer edge, where soft cushions have been arranged for guests or initiates or, apparently, time-traveling you. Someone hands you a fig wrapped in honeyed barley. The sweetness hits instantly. You've never tasted anything like it, and you immediately want 5 more. Not the point, but still. The drumming shifts 2 beats, then a pause. 2 beats, then a pause. A priest steps into the center, robes glittering with small bronze discs that catch the firelight and reflect it like slow-motion lightning. She carries a bowl. Steam curls from it, scented with myrrh and some herb you can't name but wish you could bottle. She pours it gently into one of the stone pools, and the harpists begin. It's not what you expect. There's no melody, no song, really, just layered tones. Long, slow plucks that shimmer against each other like light on moving water. The sound seems to stretch in every direction, upward into the stars, downward into the wet soil, outward across the city's slumbering rooftops. You close your eyes and feel it in your chest, not like a concert, like a tide. And here's your fringe gem of the night. Certain Sumerian harp forms, particularly the boat-shaped lyres, were rumored to be replicas of celestial vessels, the kind used by gods to sail across the night sky. So playing them wasn't just music, it was reenactment, a ritual echo of divine movement. This isn't a band, it's a spaceship launch. The notes shift, now sharper, now cascading. One harpist taps the wooden side of her instrument in rhythm. With the drum, Another scrapes a string with a polished reed for a soft, shivering vibration. You're hearing things you didn't know harps could do. You glance down and realize you've been clutching your borrowed string diagram, the tears of the moon tuning, and weirdly, the current pattern feels similar, as if they're using that scale right now. Whether that's coincidence or some deep, instinctual connection, you can't say, but it makes your skin prickle. Historians still argue whether these scales were strictly followed or improvised based on moment, mood, and environment. Some say every harpist adhered to sacred ratios passed down through priestly lineages. Others argue they tuned by ear, heart, or even celestial alignment, shifting pitches to mirror planetary movements. A musical horoscope, basically. Tonight feels like a mix. There's structure here enough to recognize, but also fluidity. Like the musicians are listening as much as playing. To each other, to the night. To the barely perceptible hum of tuned strings echoing from the stones. The priest pours again, this time into her own cupped hand, which she lifts skyward before letting the water fall back into the pool. You're not even sure you're breathing any more than one final chord, not loud, not flashy, just complete, as if the music decided, yes, that's enough. The silence afterward isn't empty, it's full, brimming with resonance. And then, slowly, people begin to move again. The harpists lower their instruments. The priest steps back. You hear the faint squeak of sandals and the rustle of linen robes. No one claps. No one speaks. That's not what this is for. The music wasn't for them. It wasn't even for you. It was for the rain, for the moon, for the gods above and the stone below. You remain seated, not ready to leave yet. The man next to you stands, stretches, then leans in and says, "That one was tuned to the owl's cry." You hear it. You blink, and just as he says it, somewhere in the distance, an owl calls, low, reedy, rhythmic, and you do hear it. Perfect fifth. The harpist who mimicked it had gotten it right. Suddenly, this doesn't feel like a bedtime story anymore. It feels like you've been let in on a secret. The rain has been whispering for 5,000 years. You slowly rise, limbs heavy, brain floating. The musicians are already filing away, instruments wrapped and bowed respectfully, like monks tucking sacred texts into their sleeves. One of them your young harpist friend from earlier gives you a little wave as he disappears into the corridor. You don't wave back. You just smile. Because somehow, you know this isn't the end. There's more, still more to tune. More to hear. The night, after all, is just beginning to hum. You leave the courtyard slowly, like your bones have melted into your joints. Every step feels more like gliding than walking. The temple is quieter now, not silent but humming. That soft, post-ceremony resonance hangs in the air like incense you can't quite see. You pass a pillar with a carving you hadn't noticed earlier, a harp entwined with a serpent. You wonder if it's symbolic, or if someone just thought it looked cool. Hard to say with ancient art. You're not heading back to your chamber. Not yet. Note night, you're drawn deeper, to the edge of the temple grounds, where the sacred merges with the ordinary. You find yourself in the artisan's quarter, a quieter zone where the instruments are born before they're ever blessed, tuned, or plucked. The rain has stopped completely, but small puddles glisten on the clay floor, reflecting the amber glow of scattered lamps. It smells like wet wood and hot resin, A small workshop is still active. One door half open, soft hammering from within. You step inside. This is the luthier's domain, and it's not as tidy as you might expect. Scraps of shaped wood litter the surfaces, along with dried reeds, pots of sticky glue, shards of broken string, and something that looks suspiciously like a goat's jawbone. You try not to stare. A squat man with arms like tree trunks nods at you once, then returns to sanding a curved frame. His hands move with the casual speed of someone who's done this 1,000 times, and now you're witnessing something rare. This is where the instruments that fuel entire ceremonies are conceived and not in temples, but in sawdust. Your historical gem for tonight. Sumerian harps, or lyres more accurately, were often made from date palm wood, prized for its flexibility and strength. The soundbox was typically a curved wooden body, covered with leather or thin skin, and the strings were twisted gut or sinews, sometimes goat. Occasionally, for special instruments, they'd use imported wood from the north, which added an exotic tone to the final sound, a musical luxury item. But now, your fringe fact. Some temple workshops included rituals for the birth of an instrument. Yes, literally. The harp wasn't just built, it was born. Builders would whisper prayers into the hollow body before the soundboard was sealed. Some even left a drop of scented oil or dried herb inside as a kind of spiritual seasoning. It wasn't just craftsmanship, it was animation, turning raw matter into something that could sing. Tonight you see both sides. The builder finishes sanding, brushes dust from the harp's frame, then brings over a warm leather pouch. Inside, 7 carefully prepared strings, coiled like sleeping snakes. He strings the instrument slowly, murmuring something under his breath. With each knot, you can't quite hear the words, but you catch the rhythm. String, pause, pull, pause, tie. Whispered by the 5th string, the room feels different, not louder, but fuller. Like the harp is already listening, already preparing to become something. He hands it to you. No ceremony. Just a grunt and a tilt of the chin that says, "Go on." You cradle the harp gently. It's warm, still alive from his hands. Maybe. You pluck a single note. Low, rich, and trembling with that beautiful imperfection of a string not fully stretched. Yet it vibrates into your chest. Then he reaches into a nearby pot and smears something onto the final tuning pega thick. Dark oil that smells like rain and citrus and earth. He motions for you to twist the peg gently. And here it is, your scholarly controversy for the section. Historians still debate whether Sumerians used any form of pitch standardization. Some argue there was a bass tone, likely set by a standard pipe or flute made of reed, which all string instruments would align to. Others claim each temple had its own tonal preferences based on local materials, weather, and even altitude. It wasn't out of tune, just tuned differently, like regional dialects, but for sound. You twist the peg, the string tightens. The tone rises, clean and sharp and strangely familiar. You pluck another, then another. Soon you're playing the first few notes from that moon-tear scale. It's not perfect, but it's close enough that the luthier raises an eyebrow. Maybe even impressed. Hard to say. His face doesn't move much. He takes the harp back gently and begins wrapping it in soft wool. Then, he He picks up a burnt stylus and scratches something into the wooden angular, cuneiform style symbol shaped like a water droplet. You recognize it. Rain. That's what he names it. Maybe not for the tuning. Maybe for the night it was born. Either way, it feels right before you leave. He offers you a small string coil of your own goat sinew, wound tight like a little bracelet, a souvenir, a reminder, or maybe a promise. You exit quietly, the string loop in your hand, fingers already memorizing its texture, and now the temple looms. Again in the distance, lit, waiting, but your path veers. You follow a low wall around the temple perimeter until you find a quiet terrace, where the musicians sometimes go to reflect or nap. A harp rests there, unattended, slightly older, frame nicked and worn, but still whole. You sit beside it, stretch out your legs, and watch the moonlight glaze over the wet bricks. You don't play, not tonight. You just listen to the night insects, tuning themselves to the slow drip of water from the eaves to the wind, shifting pitch, as it curls past stone and open doorway, and to the silence between it all, where something deeper waits. Not quite sound, not quite stillness, just potential. Like a harp right before the first note. You're still on the terrace when the sun thinks about showing. Up, just a ghost of light, at first a pale line creeping over the roof lines, quietly pushing night out of the corners. The rainwater in the courtyard has mostly evaporated, leaving only scattered wet patches shaped like little clouds on the stone floor. You yawn and stretch, and the goat sinew string on your wrist creaks slightly, like it's waking up to dot down. Below, the temple begins to stir. Not all at once. This place isn't a rooster crow kind of town. It's more of a slow simmer. You hear the shuffle of sandals, the low mutter of a cook lighting a fire, the sudden clatter of something ceramic someone definitely didn't mean to drop, and then the faintest sound of tuning against somewhere distant. Like a prelude beginning in another part of the temple. You decide to investigate again, because at this point, curiosity has you on a leash, and it's not letting go. You wind your way down into one of the more obscure corridors, less adorned. More worn, the walls here are damp in patches, and the murals are simpler. These aren't for guests. This is the musician's hall, the backstage, the dusty closet of temple glamour. And it's perfect at the far end, in a small antechamber with mismatched mats and a cracked oil lamp flickering against the wall. You find two apprentices. One is half asleep, the other hunched over a harp like it's a stubborn puzzle. The strings are clearly too tight. The sound is sharp, edgy like an instrument that's had one too many cups of date wine. You ask if you can try. Surprisingly, they let you. Maybe because you still look half-dream, like you belong to some other timeline. Maybe because of the string on your wrist. You adjust the tuning pegs, one by one. Loosen, listen, pluck, loosen. Again, here's your historical touchstone for the morning. Sumerian musicians were often taught to tune by mimicking the tonal intervals found in nature bird calls, wind over pottery lips, the rhythm of raindrops hitting different surfaces. The phrase to find the voice of the instrument appears in temple records, suggesting they weren't forcing the strings into pitch, they were coaxing them. Like tuning was less engineering, more therapy. You strum softly, the harp responds not with perfect harmony, but with a kind of sigh, like it's grateful. The sleepy apprentice nods slowly. Better, he says. You spend the next stretch of time doing what, frankly, you never thought you'd do in a temple in ancient Sumer. Low-stakes harp therapy with sleepy interns. One finds an old rhythm tablet basically. A cheat sheet Tant taps out, beats with a small reed stick. You follow with strings. It's clumsy. It's delightful. Now for your quirky tidbit. There's a little-known school of thought that some Sumerian harps were also used for divination. Yes, seriously. Priests would pluck a series of strings, then read omens based on the resonance or lack thereof. A string that buzzed might mean instability. A clean tone could predict rainfall. It was less musical score, more weather report. Meets fortune cookie. One of the apprentices mentions this, half-jokingly. He calls the harp a grumpy prophet. You laugh and then both freeze as a high-pitched perfect harmonic rings out, seemingly from nowhere. You look at each other. The reed player raises an eyebrow. Rain, he says. You don't know if he's kidding, but a breeze stirs your hair at that exact moment, cool and damp with leftover sky water. Historians still argue whether divination through sound was real belief or just priestly performance. Some scholars claim it was symbolic another way, to show control over the unpredictable. Others insist those rituals were deadly serious, part of a broader Sumerian obsession with symmetry, harmony, and celestial alignment. A string out of tune wasn't just a bad note, it was a warning. But sitting here now, the line between ritual and real feels paper-thin, eventually. The apprentices are summoned called to some duty that involves more moving amphory and fewer harp epiphanies. They shuffle off, leaving you alone with the now cooperative instrument. You strum one final time, and the notes are soft but steady. It's not a concert, it's a thank you. You leave the harp there and return to the hallway. By now the temple is fully awake. And now for the surprise twist of the morning. A scribeong, ink-stained, clearly in a rush pulls you aside and hands you a clay tablet. He says your presence is requested below. You're not even surprised anymore. You descend a different set of steps wider, cleaner, lined with little alcoves full of musical relics, broken harps, cracked reeds, rusted tuning pegs wrapped in silk. It's a museum, but the kind only initiates get to see. One display shows a tuning guide etched into stone, a full visual map of the 7 tiers of the rain god. The same diagram you were given earlier, but here's the kicker. Someone has added to it a new mark, a second arc beneath the first. As if tracing a harmony, a second path. You trace it with your finger. A temple elder appears beside you, quiet as an owl. She looks at the diagram, then at you. Then says something you won't forget. There is always another tuning. And just like that, the real lesson drops. This whole time, you've been learning about strings and notes and sacred scales, but the truth is, it was never just about the harps. It was about listening differently, about realizing that even the most ancient music wasn't static. It was fluid, evolving, alive. She walks you down one more hall, a long, narrow one that ends in a small chamber filled with scrolls and tablets. And in the center, a harp you've never seen before. Carved from 2 kinds of wood, strung with something almost translucent, and positioned directly beneath a skylight. Morning sun floods it, making it glow. You don't touch it, you just sit, and, once again, The silence says more than sound. Not emptiness dash expectancy. As if this room is waiting for the right moment to sing again. You sit with that glowing harp for a long while. It doesn't ask anything of you. Doesn't dare you to play. It just is. Sunlight angles through the skylight like a warm blade of glass, catching on the carved patterns in the harp's frame. Tiny spirals, maybe river waves, or maybe just the artist's idle daydreams made permanent. Your fingers twitch once, not to play. Just a muscle memory, like your body hasn't caught up to your awe eventually. The temple elder returns with 2 clay tablets smaller than most, and clearly worn from years of handling. She places one in front of you. It's another tuning map. But this one different. Instead of neat rows of cuneiform, this is chaotic. The notes seem to double back on themselves. There are loops, spirals, even an etched droplet at the center surrounded by radiating lines. It looks less like music and more like a diagram of a storm. You ask her what it is. She smiles and says, "The tuning of the flood." Your historian brain perks up like it's had coffee. Now, for tonight's mainstream historical gem, in Sumerian mythology, there is a flood story that predates the biblical Noah's Ark by centuries. It's the tale of Ziusudra, who survives a great deluge sent by the gods. Scholars have long noted that these flood myths are woven deeply into Sumerian cosmology. What's less known, there are references very obscure, but tantalizing in old temple inventories and song tablets to a flood tuning, a musical structure said to be used in rituals remembering or reenacting the Great Flood. You look back at the map. It doesn't make sense in a linear way, but your fingers begin to trace it instinctively, like a maze with only one right path. If you trust your ear more than your eyes, you lift your gaze. The harp glows. You sit before it and start to pluck, and something changes. The notes don't just sound, they move. Not physically, but they spiral. They echo longer. Lower notes stretch like liquid shadow. Higher ones flutter up like startled birds. You're not playing music anymore. You're weaving weather, and this is where the fringe theory crashes the party. Some fringe researchers, usually relegated to obscure journals and awkward conference panels, argue that certain Sumerian musical arrangements weren't just auditory, they were spatial, arranged and performed specifically to create physical responses. Pressure in the ears, tingling in the chest, even altered states of consciousness. This tuning, the flood scale, might have been an early form of sonic architecture. Not music you danced, to music you entered, and you're starting to believe it. The chamber feels larger now. Your pulse has slowed to match the rhythm you're plucking. The room smells different too, like ozone and river mud. But the most haunting part? You swear you can hear other strings, ones you're not touching, distant. Faint harmonic shadows that respond as if the harp is playing with itself. A duet with memory. You stop playing. The silence comes back like a tide going out. You sit frozen, not afraid, just held, the way a spider's web holds do. The elder nods. That, she says, was the rain god's memory. No elaboration. Just those 6 words, and she's gone again. You sit in the thick quiet. You think about every note you've heard since arriving, every drop, every tuning, the way string and water and stone are somehow inexplicably part of the same system, not separate disciplines. One fluid, vibrating web. Now, Here's your open scholarly debate for this section. Historians still can't agree on the purpose of ancient Sumerian echo chambers. Small, rounded temple rooms with unusual acoustics. Some believe they were meant to amplify musical instruments during rituals. Others argue they were listening rooms, designed to enhance quiet rather than sound places to tune the self before entering sacred rites. And a few suggests they were made to house performances of these non-linear scales. Music that doesn't move forward, but around. Music like memory. Like water, you glance at the second clay tablet the elder left. This one is less a diagram, more a short inscription. When the water fell from the sky, we sang not to stop it, but to remember it came. You're not sure what to do with that. So you just repeat it in your mind, letting it echo like the music did. And now, for the final stretch of the morning, you climb the stairs out of the chamber and re-enter the world, a little unsteady. The light has changed. Afternoon now. The sun higher, the temple louder. Children run past carrying fruit baskets. A priest scolds someone for misplacing a stylus. Life goes on, like you didn't just play a rain memory from 3,000 years ago. But everything feels tuned differently. Colors are sharper. You're hearing more sensitive. You can tell when someone nearby steps lightly or when their footfall is rushed. You pick up the tone of sandals brushing clay, the creak of a harp string being adjusted somewhere deep in the temple. The tuning is everywhere. You just hadn't noticed. You returned briefly to the rain-slick courtyard, now dry and dusty again. You find a spot under a fig tree and sit. Nearby, a young girl plays a small reed flute, clearly still learning. Her rhythm's off. Notes squeak. But the tune is the one you recognize. The one you've now played. The one that loops. You smile, and this time you don't need to play. You just hear the wind picks up again, dancing through the fig leaves in sync with her melody. A few clouds creep into the sky, gray and heavy, but, for now, they just hover. Maybe remembering to. You wake up, no idea how long it's been. The fig tree still casts a lazy shadow over you, but the light is golden now, slanted and soft. Evening. In Sumer feels like the whole world is exhaling. The heat slips off the stones, and the sky blurs into a dusty peach. Somewhere close, water trickles gently from a channel you didn't notice before. It's not loud, but you feel it more than hear it, like the temple is tuning itself again before nightfall. You sit up slowly, your joints crack, you feel different, not tired, not wired, just tuned. Like all your cells are humming the same slow note. In the courtyard, an older man kneels beside a small collection of harp fragments. Bits of wood, fraying strings, curved bone bridges. He's sorting them like puzzle pieces, careful and slow. You recognize him from earlier, one of the senior musicians, the one who laughed when you played your first clumsy scale. You wander over, he gestures for you to sit. No words, just an invitation. He hands you a broken tuning peg, carved from cedar, smoothed by decades of fingers. This belonged to the sky harp, he says, finally. She was our loudest one. You blink. Loudest. He nods, not in volume, in memory. And just like that, you're on another detour, but not really. Because in Sumer, everything loops back if you wait long enough. Now's your mainstream historical fact. Some Sumerian harps, especially the larger ceremonial ones, were designed not just for sound, but for projection. Their construction took acoustics into account long before physics textbooks existed. Certain temple walls were curved to reflect notes. Strings were chosen based on material resonance: gut for warmth, sinew for edge, bronze for bite. The sky harp, mentioned in fragmentary temple inventories, was said to be played during celestial ceremonies, aligning with planetary movements and seasonal festivals. The man shows you the rest of the broken parts. They're worn but intact, each etched with symbols you recognize. Now rain sound, wind. One even has the spiral from the flood tuning. Then he chuckles, but she was too proud. One day she cracked, right down the spine. You ask why they never repaired her. Because she taught us more broken than whole, he says. And that's the quirky twist for this section. Sumerians sometimes deliberately deconstructed instruments after key ceremonies. It was symbolic, signifying that the music had served its purpose, that the ritual was complete. Some even believed that an instrument could only contain a divine tone once. After that, it had to be disassembled, buried, or left as an offering. Not every tool was meant to be eternal. Some were meant to fade with the note. You help him gather the fragments, placing each carefully into a linen wrap. He tells you they'll be stored in the archive of tones, a chamber you haven't seen yet, reserved for instruments no longer played, but not forgotten. As the sky turns amber purple, he hands you a final object, a tiny harp-shaped amulet carved from lapis lazuli. It's cool in your palm, almost weightless. For your wrist, he says, to remind you which way the raindrops fall. You thread it onto the goat sinew cord. It swings gently, in rhythm with your pulse. Back in the central hall, preparations begin for a twilight ritual. No fanfare, just slow arrangements: billows brought out, oil lamps lit, incense trickling from a wall niche. Musicians tune in quiet pockets, plucking, pausing, adjusting. This isn't for tourists, it's for the temple itself, a kind of sonic housekeeping. You notice that some harps have raindrop bowls beneath them still. The water's mostly evaporated, but one bowl holds a few shimmering drops. The string above it has relaxed, cooled, perfectly balanced. It's the purest tone you've heard all day, and this brings us to our scholarly debate. There's no unanimous agreement on whether Sumerian musicians used water bowls beneath harps as functional tuners or just symbolic tools. Some archaeologists argue it's coincidence: bowls and instruments stored near each other. Others see design, acoustical intention, and understanding that humidity, resonance, and ritual all play into one another. Still others think the water was listening, meant to absorb the music like a mirror absorbs a face. You sit quietly as the music begins, no stage, no spotlight, just the rise and fall of layered tones. Flutes like warm wind, drums soft as distant thunder, harps sighing through old songs no one wrote down, because they don't need to be. You feel it again, that same sensation from the flood chamber, that you're inside the music now, not beside it. Like the temple itself is breathing in rhythm. The walls pulse faintly. Even your heartbeat syncs with the low thrum of string and reed. A young singer begins to chant. Not words exactly, sounds shaped like syllables, but ancient and softened over time. It's more lullaby than language. She walks slowly between the musicians, dipping her fingers into the bowl beneath each harp. With each wet touch, the note shifts slightly. Not wrong, just deeper. Sadder, wetter. You realize she's tuning. With memory, not to make it perfect, to make it real. And suddenly, your eyelids feel heavy again. The warmth of the oil lamps, the slow rhythm, the familiar melody. The music is folding time around you like a soft quilt. This is what they meant, you think. The tuning of rain wasn't just a system. It was a method of letting go, of tuning the instrument to match the moment even if the moment was cracked, weeping, unfinished. Especially then, you lay back against a cushion. The lapis amulet settles against your chest. You close your eyes, and for a moment, the harp from the flood chamber whispers again. Just a single note, then silence. Perfectly in tune, night comes slowly in smub, not with sudden darkness, but with a gentle unraveling threads of lavender and indigo pulled across the sky by unseen hands. The temple hums quieter now. No more chanting. Just the soft clatter of sandals against clay, the echo of a bowl being set down, the creak of harp strings settling in cooler air. You stretch beneath the fig tree once more, blinking up at a sky that's now a deep violet curtain. A single star appears, then another, and another. They pulse faintly, like distant plucks on a celestial harp. You hear footsteps, the elder returns, yes. The same one who first handed you that water bowl. 100 years ago by now. Or maybe 100 minutes. You're no longer sure what time does in this place. She sits beside you. No ceremony. Just shared silence. Finally, she speaks. The tuning is finished. For now, you nod. Not quite understanding, but somehow you do. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Mesopotamian cities like Ur and Eridu didn't see music as background noise or entertainment. It was a tool for healing, for storytelling, for divine communication, and yes, for measurement. Musical intervals sometimes helped define proportions in architecture. The same math that structured a ziggurat's steps also formed the ratio between harp strings. Geometry you could hear. You remember what she said earlier, that water was the first tuner. And suddenly it clicks. The rain wasn't just metaphor. It was literal. It was science, religion, and song, all rolled into one soft, steady drip. Rain taught the harps to sing. The harps taught the people to listen. And the people, somehow, tuned themselves to everything in between. You ask her one final question. Do the harps remember us? She smiles like you finally asked the right thing. Not in the way you think, she says. They remember your tension, your hesitation, the weight in your fingers. They remember the pressure between notes. And here's your fringe fact. Some Mesopotamian scholars believed that instruments had spirits not just from the gods, but from the people who played them. Harps were passed down, not just for quality, but for residue. The belief that every note left a shadow. That even when silent, the instrument hummed with echoes of everyone who'd ever strummed it. You wonder how many ghosts sat beside you. Earlier she stands. The lapis amulet glints against your chest. Before she disappears again into the colonnade, she says, "The rain is coming back soon." You think she's being poetic, until, with absolutely cinematic timing, you hear it a single drop, then another, then a dozen. The air shifts cooler, sharper, sweeter. You tilt your face toward the stars and let the rain hit you. This time, you don't seek shelter. You just listen. One harp somewhere in the temple catches a drop on its lowest string, a soft twang, followed by another higher, then another. And slowly, without plan or conductor, a dozen instruments begin to tune themselves. You don't move, you don't breathe. It's the same scale you've heard all day but softer, truer. The final debate of the night, and maybe of this entire tradition. Historians still argue whether Sumerian music was meant to be preserved or if it was intentionally ephemeral. There are only fragments of notation. Some say. Others believe the absence of a codified system was the point. You weren't meant to play the same song twice. You were meant to tune, feel, release. Each performance was a single raindrop here, gone, remembered only in ripples. The rain picks up, not hard, just steady. The harps keep singing. You close your eyes, no dreams come. Only silence, wrapped in memory. Only the tuning, only rain. The sound slows now, like someone slowly lowering the volume on the universe. You feel the damp earth beneath you, cool and grounding. The scent of rain and cedar wood lingers in the air. A breeze drifts by, and you can almost hear the whisper of ancient reeds swaying along the Euphrates, rustling in rhythm with your breath. It's all fading now, but gently. Nothing pulled away. Just softened. The music no longer plays, but it echoes faintly, not in your ears, but somewhere else, somewhere just under your ribs. It sits there, humming low, like the aftertaste of a story. You let it stay. Even the stars, once so sharp, now blur into the night haze. The temple dissolves into shadow. The musicians have gone home. The bowls are emptied. The strings have been dried and wrapped. Everything is tucked away, everything, except the tuning that stays with you. It hums in the space between thoughts, in the pause between inhale and exhale, in the calm hush before a dream begins. So you rest now, not because the day is over, but because the note has ended. You've followed the raindrops. You've heard the harps. You've remembered the silence. Between songs and now, you finally, blissfully, fade out with them. Sweet dreams.